The ocean scares me, probably because it feels really out of control. There's nothing I can do when the waves come crashing in. And I think that's what a lot of life feels like. We can't control the things that happen around us. But in today's psalm, we're going to learn something. We're going to be told by God that amidst the storm, he says this, "Be still and know that I am God." Join us today. All right, good morning. Welcome to our Psalm series. As always, glad you're joining us. Today we're working through Psalm 46, but I want to start with a story. I've been reading a book called Mission Possible. It was written by Marilyn Laszlo. I'll put a picture of it up here so you can see what it looks like. She was a missionary and a Bible translator for 24 years living in Papua New Guinea. What she did there was, when she got there to this particular tribe, they had no written language whatsoever. So they couldn't even have a Bible because there was nothing to ever be written down. Their language was never written down. So she had to go in and word by word by word learn how to translate what they would say into some kind of a written word, I guess is what that would be called. She wanted to, of course, translate the Bible. So she called it God Talk. Okay, she called the Bible God Talk, and she would carve out on banana leaves. This is how she tried to explain it to the tribe. But in her book, she got to know a lot of the people in this tribe, and eventually, as the boys got a little bit older, there was probably, I think, 8 of the boys that would help her, translate and teach her different words. But as they got older, she decided one day she needed to teach them how to run an outboard motor, because they would put an outboard motor on a canoe, and they would take, it was like a dugout canoe thing, and she would have to take that when she would need supplies or there was maybe an emergency. They didn't use it all the time, but she felt like she needed to teach them what to do. So she was getting ready to go to Mbunti, which is at 110 miles away. And so she was teaching the boys how to do it, and they left on this long trip. They were the captains of it. They did great, but what they realized is that it takes 4 5-gallon containers of gas to get to Mbunti, but it takes 5 gallons to get them back. So they did great. They got all the cans, into the little canoe, and they headed back from Mbunti back to their actual homes. And Marilyn said she later head back and she just fell asleep. And then suddenly she woke up because it was silent. And she looked around, it's dark, but she knew where she was, and she was an hour outside of where they actually lived. So she asked the boys, she's like, what just happened? What's wrong? And they said, well, it looks like we ran out of gas. And she said, well, how many cans did you put in there? And they said 4. And she said, well, where's the 5th? And they said, well, we didn't bring it because we thought it would be too expensive. And she was so upset. Like she said, she was so angry. She was trying to explain to them, it's going to take us 4 days just to drift back to Mbunti where they were. And so she was ranting and raving. And she said, then one of the boys said this, Marilyn, why don't we pray? He said this, Marilyn, you have told us that God created everything, the moon, stars, sun, and nothing ever falls down. That is a lot of power. You have told us that God knows where we are at all times. He knows we need gas. So they began to pray. Papa God, I thought that was cute, they call him that. Papa God, we are really in trouble. But you said, be there. And all those stars started shining. The moon on high, the sun tomorrow, all those things you made never fall down. It takes great power to hold all those stars up above. They laid their hands on the motor. And they prayed, Papa God, you have much power. Your Jesus walked on the water. What is it for you to make our engine push us home? It would be nothing for you, Papa God. Papa God, you are enough. Yes, you are enough. We don't need any gas. Some of the boys pulled on the starter rope and the motor sputtered. Please, Papa God, give power to this motor. He pulled the starter rope a second time, and in an instant, the motor started. The boys beat on the side of the canoe. Papa God, thank you. This is great. Papa God has power. Marilyn knew they were running on a trickle of gas and fumes. She really didn't think it would get them home, but Jesus taught her a valuable lesson from these children. And the motor never stopped until they actually got back to their homes. I thought it was a great reminder to us of how big and powerful God is. And yet so often we just don't think to pray. We can get angry like she does, but praying was kind of like, I don't know about that. But she learned a valuable lesson that God could be trusted in the midst of trouble. So for Psalm 46, we're going to see a verse today that we've probably all heard a million times, because verse 10 will tell us when life takes a turn for the worse. It says this, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Now, for this particular psalm, the backdrop of it was most likely a backdrop of a military victory, okay? There were a couple times in history that this psalm could have been written, but of course we don't know which time period that would have been. The sons of Korah wrote this psalm, and remember, they would write a psalm and then they would put it to music and have it be sung in the temple. And so it starts out with, I think, how these young boys in Papua New Guinea actually felt. Psalm 46, it says, "For the director of music of the sons of Korah, according to Alamoth, a song." Verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. This verse, the first verse, tells us a couple things. One is a refuge is a place where we go where we need shelter. We need shelter from the storm, a shelter to be shielded from life's problems. But sometimes what we realize is that God doesn't always shelter us. At times we are afflicted and we suffer things. But that's when we find that God is our strength, our ever-present help in the time of trouble. So sometimes He actually is our refuge where nothing happens to us. Other times things bad do happen to us, but He is an ever-present help to us in those times. Here's what I've thought. There are times when God protects us from bad things, but other times He comforts us through them. Now, for so many people living in the United States, we actually don't really turn to God as our refuge and strength very much. We turn to our bank accounts, our jobs, our relationships, our skills, our training. We look to those things first, and then somehow when things get really, really, really bad, then it's like, okay, it's so bad, I think I'll pray now. Like, that's how we do things in America. But I love this psalm because it points us back to we should be praying first, not last. Because God says, I want to be your refuge and your strength, because He says, I am ever present for you. It's said of Martin Luther that during the dark days of the Reformation and all the crazy madness that was going on back then, it was dark, it was dangerous for him. He would get really discouraged and really depressed. But this is the psalm that he would turn to for comfort. Now, when God is our refuge and strength, really think about that. We don't really have to fear anything when we actually can trust Him. Look at verse 2. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. It's just like this. When the waters behind us are just surging and mountains, everything's crashing around us, that's how we feel. It's like you don't have to fear. You don't have to be afraid. And I always think, imagine if we knew God that well and we really took this verse to heart. Imagine the peace that you would have when you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that no matter whatever happened in your life, tragedy, economic crash, job loss, financial problems, health issues, whatever it is, that we don't need to be afraid. We really don't. because we trust that God is doing something in the midst of the chaos. And this psalm makes us really understand that. Now, the psalmist seems to change directions after verse 3, and he now goes from present to future. A future where there's going to be no chaos, no tragedy, no heartache, no militaries, no war. Look at verse 4. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. The city they are talking about is Jerusalem. Jesus is going to come back someday and reign as king from Jerusalem. And this verse talks about a river. And we see this river all the way in Revelation 22, verse 1. Look at this. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. They're talking about the city of Jerusalem. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. The thrones of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever. The angel said to me, these words are trustworthy and true. The Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, sent his angel to show his servants a thing that must soon take place. See, there is such hope that God is our refuge and our strength here and now. But the good news is that one day we will be with him forever. And there won't be chaos and sadness and sickness and death and all of those things. That was hopeful. But the psalmist wants to remind us about Jerusalem. Look at verse 5. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in an uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Isn't that amazing? It's like God is over it all. If we can really grasp that, it will change how we view this life. Rob and I were talking about the other day the United States and what kind of a disaster it's becoming. But this verse was a reminder that no matter what is going on in our country, God is still there. It doesn't mean that things are always going to be good here. It just means as followers of Jesus, he's never left. No matter what happens to our country, he's still there. There's still a purpose. There's still a plan. It's all going to come to its culmination in Jerusalem when Jesus comes back. Verse 8, come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Sometimes we look at the nations around us and we go, where in the world is God? And yet this psalm reminds us that he is right in the middle of it all, and he has a plan. And like I said, that passage in Revelation reminds us that that is the end of the world as we know it. Verse 8, come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he has brought on the earth. It's a reminder that good or bad, whether it's in the country or in our personal life, we are to do this. Verse 10, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. When everything falls apart, we need to stop and do just that. Be still and know that I am God. You know what got me through the death of my cousin? My cousin was hit by a drunk driver at a head-on collision. Be still and know that I'm God. She loved Jesus with all her heart, could not even fathom that God would want to take her home. And yet I had to remind myself that God is God and he's in control. And I could trust that even through the pain of this car crash and the accident that just hurt so many people, I just knew that God was God. And he had a purpose for her death that I'll never understand this side of heaven. But I'm going to trust him. We'll end here with the story of Elizabeth Elliott, who she understood all too well how to be still. She suffered the loss of 2 husbands. The first one was Jim Elliott, of course, killed by the Aka Indians in Ecuador, trying to reach them with the gospel. The second husband, his name was Addison Leach. He was consumed by cancer and died. But in relating what these experiences were like, she referred to this particular psalm, saying that in the first shock of death, everything that has seemed most dependable has given way. Mountains are falling, earth is reeling. In such a time, it is a profound comfort to know that although all things seem to be shaken, one thing is not. God is not shaken. She added that the thing that is most needful is to do what the psalmist does later, to be still and to know that God is God. God is God whether we recognize it or not. But it comforts us and infuses strength into our faltering spirits to rest on that truth. And I hope we can do that today. That is one of those verses that I hope that we can memorize when our world starts feeling like chaos, like the storms behind me, the oceans are raging, and there's just everything feels out of control. Remember to be still and know that I am God. Because in the end, God will win, and we never want to forget that. Hope that helps you today. Have a really good day.